what I want to come to now is the 1970s that Robert Rosencrantz quite correctly reminds us of. Because then a crisis was announced. And I want to quote from 3 newspapers. The Christian Science Monitor. Warning, Earth's climate is changing faster than even experts expect. I really like that. Your own New York Times, a major cooling of the climate is widely inevitable. And Newsweek, back to consensus. Meteorologists are almost unanimous that catastrophic famines will result from global cooling. That was the 1970s, and there are many headlines. And what I would like to stress is, it was a stress of consensus. It was faster than expected. The evidence came from the oceans, from polar bears. It's always polar bears. From the changing seasons, and it's always disaster. Why do we believe them now? And what is important in this, I think, is to remember what that first Earth Day claimed. The first Earth Day in America claimed the following, that because of global cooling, the population of America would have collapsed to 22 million by the year 2000. And that the average calorie intake of the average American would be, wait for this, 2,400 calories. Would that it were. It's nonsense and very dangerous. And what we have fundamentally forgotten is simple primary school science. Climate always changes. It is always, as Dick said, warming or cooling. It's never stable. And if it were stable, it would actually be impossible. Because it would be the first time for 4.5 billion years. Second, humans have been influencing climate for 1 million years as hominids, from the first hominid that set fire to the savanna grasslands in Africa. When particulates and gases started to rise and they changed the reflectivity of the surface of the Earth. It's a long relationship. So the debate, is climate changing and are humans affecting climate change, is actually nearly irrelevant. The answer is yes and yes. And always will be. What is really crucial about this is something that none of the scientists or none of the politicians want you really to hear. Climate is the most complex system we know, governed by thousands of factors. I haven't time to list them. But the point is, it's like in my country, Glasgow on a Saturday night. Chaos. And what we're trying to do is manage it by dealing with one part. And it just won't work. That's the danger. In such a system, doing something at the margins and not doing something at the margins are equally unpredictable. And the question we should be asking our politicians are, what climate are you actually aiming to produce? And when we get there, won't it change anyway? The crisis is therefore in ourselves, and if we are rejecting this, and I ask you passionately to do so for the next 2 more important reasons, our political agenda, as Michael hinted, is wrong. There are 2 great crises in the world, of which the biggest, unquestionably, is 4 billion people in poverty. And this topic is an echochondria of our rich selves, London, New York, and Washington. It's about us and about our hypochondria around the world. If you actually have clean water, you have modern energy, you will cope with change, whatever it is, hot, wet, cold, or dry. I'm a left-wing critic of global warming because the agenda is fundamentally wrong and dangerous. And believe you me, neither Republican nor Democrat will do anything about it, because the second crisis is a crisis of hypocrisy. Now, Michael hinted at this, but I come from Europe, which has been lecturing the world on this subject. Let me tell you, the hypocrisy in Europe is absolutely mind-blowing. I am embarrassed. The Environment Agency in Europe will predict, under the Kyoto Protocol, we won't even be minus, that by 2012 we'll be plus. And did you know that Ireland, whom we all love, actually under the Kyoto Protocol is allowed a growth of 13%? And some of the figures for Europe are just spectacularly worrying. Spain, Italy, Portugal, we're in the 40%. And yet we lecture the world. What we see in this is an enormous danger for politicians in terms of their hypocrisy. I'm not going to say anything about Al Gore and his house, but it is a very serious point. Global warming is also dangerous because I am an environmentalist. But what I'm beginning to see is that global warming is setting an agenda which is actually damaging for the environment. Biofuels, in which the energy relationships are very dodgy, but which have a very significant effect, certainly in my country, on biofuels. What is more, we're having wind farms placed for global warming on very, very sensitive peat moor habitats. Don't think, therefore, that if you're an environmentalist, you have to be attached to this agenda, because it is now overarching, over-dominant, and is actually taking money and effort away from genuine and real on-the-ground habitat environmental concerns. Let me end with two. Angela Merkel, German Chancellor, my own good Prime Minister, whom I voted, let me emphasise, arguing in public 2 weeks ago as to who in Annie Gets the Gun style can produce the best temperature. I can do 2 degrees C, said Angela. No, I can only do 3, said Tony. Stand back a minute. Those are politicians telling you that they can control climate to a degree Celsius. This is a political crisis, not a crisis, as put here, and I ask you passionately to vote against it.